Sloly, thank you so much for your service, both in the military and in policing in this country. Thank you so much. It wasn't clear yet, but you were the chief of police in the Ottawa Police Service for the Freedom Convoy, and which included, and you had that position up until the Emergency Act was invoked until the day after the Emergency Act was invoked on February 15th. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
So in the weeks in advance of the arrival of the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa, did convoy organizers seek permissions and direction from Ottawa Police Service and or the City of Ottawa on where and how to park in the downtown core?
Prior to the arrival, there were negotiations and communications between some of the convoy elements. Those communications included efforts from the Ontario Provincial Police and, yes, from the Ottawa Police Service, specifically our police liaison teams.
So in other words, they were seeking permission on where to park, and that permission from the city and from the Ottawa Police Service was provided to them, which included emergency lanes on Wellington and side streets, et cetera. Is that correct?
Permissions is a word that I wouldn't normally use. There were communications and negotiations around how best to reduce the public safety impact of such a large gathering and demonstration in the city, and there were some successful and constructive efforts on both parties, both the police services and the organizers.
Would it be fair to suggest, sir, that throughout the protesters being here, the Freedom Convoy, members of the OPS and the City of Ottawa, from what I understand, had continued dialogue and communication with organizers of that protest?
Dialogue and communication continued from the weeks before all the way through, to my understanding, to my last day in office anyway.
Good. So, which is important, and I'll get to that in a minute. But as the convoy protest continued, obviously, given your background and experience, you and your team developed operational plans to how to best to manage and disperse the protest. Is that correct?
Ultimately, plans were updated on a regular basis, and the ultimate goal was to end safely and successfully the events here in Ottawa.
Okay. So then, you appeared before, and I'm sure my colleague, Mr. Brock will get into the details of those plans, but you appeared before another parliamentary committee this spring where you said that you had asked the federal government for, and I quote, literally everything that we could think of, end quote. Now, did that include a request from the government to invoke the Emergencies Act?
There were no explicit conversations that I had with the levels of government in regarding the declarations of Emergency Act at all three levels.
Did anyone else within your Ottawa Police Service ask for the government to invoke the Emergencies Act?
Sorry, one correction to my former answer. We did have conversations with the City of Ottawa around their emergency, but not the other two levels of government.
Okay.
Can you just repeat your question for me, sir?
Did anyone else within your police service ask the federal government to invoke the Emergencies Act that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of, sir.
Now, what support did your police service request from the federal government during the convoy protest, and did the federal government provide you with the resources you requested, and in order for you to be maintaining order in Ottawa?
The primary request that I made on a regular basis, continual basis, was resources, particularly more police officers and police-trained personnel. Secondarily, access to tow trucks, predictable access to a large number of officers, 1,800, and access to predictable, sustainable levels of heavy tow trucks.
For that.
Yes, sir.
Did the government, so you asked for that, did the government provide you any indication that that was something that you were going to receive?
We received supports from both provincial and federal governments right from the beginning. Outreach prior to the arrival, we received OPP officers, RCMP officers, and we had that support throughout. After the official request for 1,800, there was a greater level of integration within our command structure, and we started to see a greater inflow of those resources, particularly over the last 3 to 4 days of my time in office, sir.
Now, was there any shortcomings in what you requested?
I wish I could have got it all within hours, but there are huge logistical challenges to gather officers from across the country that is actually experiencing a national security crisis with locations across the country. I believe our partners did their very best. Our policing partners, particularly the OPP and RCMP, did their very best.
So with your knowledge and experience, Mr. Sloly, have you been provided with the resources that you requested in a timely way? And when requested, would you have been able to clear the protesters in downtown Ottawa using the usual, normal, existing legal authorities without the use of the Emergencies Act?
The plan that was in place on February 9th was designed without the declarations of the Provincial or Federal Emergencies Act. That said, components within both of those declarations were incredibly helpful to accelerate and safely end.
You're right.
Mr.
events.
Motz, I'm sorry your 5 minutes is up. Maybe we can follow
I'll
up.
continue on next. Thanks.